Hey, all, good evening. Thanks for joining me, Dorothea. Well, as you see, my cat has joined me right here. Anyway, folks, things have gone further off the rails than even what happened over the last weekend with Venezuela. Let me just give you this information. U.S. has demanded that Venezuela cut economic ties with Russia and China and Iran and Cuba if it wants to pump more oil. I just want to say on this that Don is the perfect name for Trump because it fits well for Don Corleone. If you don't know who he is, he was a mafia boss from an old movie called The Godfather. And that's what his nickname was, The Godfather, Don Corleone. So we have the Don right now acting like a mafia boss. It is outrageous, okay? You can't pump any of your own oil without us, and you better not send it to these countries. According to ABC, the White House has demanded that Venezuela partner exclusively with the U.S. on oil production and favor it when selling crude oil. President Trump has insisted that American companies have access to Venezuela's oil industry, which he claimed was unfairly nationalized by Maduro's predecessor, Hugo Chavez. Heaven forbid that Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez and whoever else would have done it was looking out for their own people, his own people, nationalizing the oil so that the people would get something out of it, some little profits, a percentage of it, to better their lives. I mean, this whole thing is crazy. So, Trump claimed that the interim authorities of Venezuela would be turning over between 30 and 50 million barrels of sanctioned oil to be sold under Washington's control. Again, it's the bully at the playground knocking someone down for their lunchbox. Delcy Rodriguez, a Maduro ally, sworn in as acting president on Monday, declared that neither the U.S. nor any other foreign agent would control Venezuela. Yeah, you would hope that person, the leader, would say that. It's its own place. It's its own country. It's a sovereign nation. Okay. Now, of course, the authorities have demanded the release of Maduro and Flores, both of whom pleaded not guilty to drug trafficking and weapons charges when brought before, yes, because it's all bogus. The military operation without a declaration of war or a UN Security Council resolution represents an illegal act of armed aggression of a terrorist nature. The Venezuelan prosecutor general, Tariq Saab said. Now, the Russian envoy, Vasily Nebenzia, this is at the UN Security Council, slammed Maduro's abduction as a cynical crime that cannot be justified. Chinese envoy Sun Lei also condemned the U.S., saying its military intervention of Venezuela poses a threat to peace and security in the region. President Trump is playing with fire. He's so greedy for the oil to make up for their debts, their $3 trillion debt, that they're doing this craziness against Russia and China. Now, to make matters worse, okay, so American military forces attempted to board a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the North Atlantic. The United States European Command announced shortly afterwards that the Marinera tank has been seized by American troops based on a warrant issued by a U.S. federal court. What does that have to do with being out there in international waters? The ship was captured in an operation conducted jointly by the U.S. Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of War. This is outrageous. The Marinera tanker was reportedly approaching Venezuela before the new year when the U.S. Coast Guard tried to detain it in the Caribbean Sea. Now, this is just outrageous. The crew declined to let the American officers aboard and changed course, heading towards the Atlantic. Now, this is the really creepy part. The tanker has been followed by a U.S. warship and aircraft from NATO countries ever since. Now, excuse my language, but what the hell? The photos from the Marinera, or whatever you say that, captured a military helicopter trying to land aboard the vessel, which Washington claims is involved in transporting oil from Iran and Venezuela in violation of American sanctions. How dare them? Oh my gosh. Here's footage. It's being shadowed by the U.S. Coast Guard ship in the Atlantic. Good Lord. Now, on Tuesday, the Russian Foreign Ministry expressed concern over the abnormal situation surrounding the Marinera. For reasons unknown to us, the Russian vessel is getting excessive attention from the U.S. and NATO militaries, clearly disproportionate to its peaceful status. Oh my gosh. And of course, they also had to say about what happened with the abduction of President Maduro that the U.S. conducted several days ago. Moscow has slammed America's actions as international banditry, which is exactly what it is. And they demand Maduro's release, immediate release. So, the Don, the new godfather, has decided do this or else, which is what he told the Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez. She has to do what we order her to do, or she's going to pay a price that's probably worse than Maduro's. And then I think it was General Keane was on one of those programs, saying, we're going to force her to do this, to, be a slave to us. We're going to force her to do that, and if and we'll threaten her. He didn't say exactly what type of threat, what exactly the threat was going to be, but it's just using those words. It is absolutely shocking that our U.S. officials are talking like mafia bosses and gangsters and fascists, bullies, thugs. I mean, what else can you say? What other way can I explain it? Oh my gosh, it's just crazy. It's crazy. So, I'm going to share one last thing from what Johnson said on this issue, on how the Don and his gangster administration is acting.
The failure to appreciate, we create these narratives that I think Patrick very eloquently described about the corruption of Maduro and, oh my God, how corrupt their whole system is. You know what? I don't want to hear any of that bullshit anymore in light of Nancy Pelosi's multimillionaire status through her shrewd stock investments. And it's not the Democrat, it's the Republican, Dan Caldwell, the former Navy SEAL. We go through, look at the Clinton Foundation, how they were shaking down the world for billions of dollars. So the United States has zero moral standing to lecture any other country in the world about corruption, abuse of power, persecution of political opponents. It's happening on both sides in this country. Does Venezuela have its own problem? Yeah. Not a perfect society. Let them figure it out without us interfering. But what we've seen is, I keep hearing people talk about the Monroe Doctrine, and they do not understand it at all. In fact, the Monroe Doctrine was very specific. It was designed to keep Europe from coming into the Western Hemisphere and going into a country and setting up a Western European, whether there is a British, a French, a German government in the Western Hemisphere. The United States was going to oppose that, fight that. Otherwise, if Germany, France, Spain, Portugal had a colony here already in place, the U.S. policy was, we're not going to interfere with that. That means we're not going to run covert operations. However, if the people of Mexico rose up to throw out Spain, yeah, we'd back that. We would help the Mexicans achieve independence. That was the Monroe Doctrine, non-interference. But it became, I call it the Polk Doctrine. James K. Polk, a fellow out of North Carolina. He decided in 1846, 36 years after Mexico had declared independence from Spain, that by God, we're going to provoke a war with Mexico because we want to take the territories that are now Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California. And lo and behold, we did it. That was the start of what I call the American imperialist project. It was confined primarily to this hemisphere, but Teddy Roosevelt then expanded it to the world outside the boundaries of the United States. And what ultimately this doctrine, and maybe we should call it the Don Roe Doctrine after Donald Trump, it is that we, the United States, get to tell everybody else in the Western Hemisphere who they can and cannot have diplomatic, political, and economic relations with. It doesn't matter if that China and Russia aren't coming in trying to establish colonies. It's just we get to decide who you can deal with. In fact, we get to decide who is terrorist. There are actual people that have carried out attacks against civilians that we embrace and bring in because they're attacking the people we want to attack. And while we're at it, by God, if we want to take Colombia, we're going to take Colombia. If we want Panama, we're going to take Panama, and we're going to take Greenland too. So let's have a chorus of "I'm proud to be an American." I mean, I am thoroughly disgusted with this attitude. Trump is just the latest worst example of it. Yeah. But this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, for me, Larry is spot on. Right to the jugular. That's exactly it. Now, how do you think this is going to play out? All these erratic, thuggish, weird, dominating other sovereign countries, tyrannical moves. I mean, how do you think that's going to play out over time? Considering, do you really think Russia eventually, you think Russia's going to sit there? Well, we know that in the prophecies, World War III prophecies, we see how Russia lets loose after the war with them in Ukraine is done, okay? This could be a trigger of what sets Russia off in the coming weeks, months, however it's going to take, okay? These tyrannical moves, imperialistic moves, thuggish mafia moves you know, they, the Don, he's doing this, and it really, he's on a course that could be paralleled to a German fascist leader from the 1930s. And when people started to notice what was going on with him, taking over, at first he just took over things and Europe didn't do anything. Well, that just emboldened him to do more. His plan was anyway to do that, but he thought, oh, well, this is easier than I thought, I'm sure. It just emboldened him to do more. What do you think's happening here? The same thing. So, yeah, I don't think this is going to end well. We obviously know through the prophecies it doesn't end well, but I did not factor in, did you, the Venezuela incident? Because our saints and elders did not bring up Venezuela or Latin America, but here we are. You know, we've become the ocean patrol, deciding who goes in and who goes out. We decided, who gets the oil, even though it's not our oil. Oh, yes, but, our companies were using it and they kicked us out. Venezuela has the right to do that. It's their oil. But now, it's our oil. Instead of what everybody voted for, if they did vote for Trump, one of the main reasons I voted for him, and a lot of people who were independents, which is what I am, voted, is because we wanted an end to all these wars. And he kept saying, oh, yes, over the years, oh, I'm going to end all these regime change wars. I'm going to end wars. And then he comes in, I'm going to end wars in 24 hours. And then he does the total opposite and has become, or maybe he was perhaps always this way. A lot of people are saying that. But I think he's been emboldened because nobody's able to do anything, apparently, to stop him. And when you have a narcissist, that just feeds them more. When you are helping by giving them, as they say, a balloon, giving them more helium, more air into the balloon to expand, to become bigger and bigger, that's what happens. So, yeah, not a good thing. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for following my channel. Please share your thoughts below this video. Things are heating up quickly. Everything just kind of shot off right after the new year, like a when a gun goes off at a relay. My gosh. Okay, so